everyone. Welcome to PopCultX Little Talk. It's our conversation series where we chat with a wide variety of creative-minded people. Today we are thrilled to be joined and rejoined by comic book writer, author. I remember I had this discussion with you last time, and that is Ethan Sachs. So Ethan, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's really great to have you back on, especially because Gabe is able to join us this time. So it's great because, as people may know, you are comic writer for such titles as like Midnight Suns, Star Wars Bounty Hunter, of course, Old Man Hawkeye, and your newest series, which is, I think, really what I really want to chat with you about today, is A Haunted Girl, which you wrote with your daughter, Naomi.
Most personal thing I've ever done.
And because it is personal to you, and that's really what I really wanted to talk about, is what came about, how it made you feel getting it down on paper. So
yes,
give us just a little bit of backstory and how that came to be.
Sure. So this story has been in the works for 4.5 years. And then what happened back then in the early part of 2019 is my daughter, then a freshman in high school, was hospitalized with major depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts. And, we missed a lot of warning signs. You have all that feeling of guilt and powerlessness as a parent. And I was actually writing the script for one of the issues of Galaxy's Edge in the hospital cafeteria between visiting hours. And obviously I was very distracted, but I just jotted down one line in a notebook, and that was, "The fate of all life on earth rests with a girl who doesn't know if she wants to live." And from that premise, I kind of wanted to do a story about a character that maybe my daughter could recognize going through a similar, mental health battle, but somebody who sort of perseveres, and kind of feel like this is a spoiler, but kind of overcomes and helps everyone else in the process. And so I joined my creative partner on a intrusion and a Marvel 8-page story, this incredible Mexico-based artist, Marco Lorenzana. And we were sort of working on it for a few years. We came really close to a publishing deal in February of 2020. And then the pandemic hit, and that one was scuttled. I won't mention publishers. We had some near misses a few times, but actually, I don't really believe in fate per se, but the timing ended up being perfect, as my daughter in the time since really overcame a lot, and through therapy and personal growth and all sorts of things, she's now in a much better state and was able to write it with me. And that just made all the difference, in terms of authenticity, in terms of the therapy scenes, the hospital scenes, the dialogue from all the teenage characters. That's all her, and it's made all the difference. And Syzygy Publishing, an imprint of Image Comics, took a leap of faith on us, and the early returns are humbling. They're pretty good. So here we are.
One of the things that you mentioned is authenticity to the perspective of your daughter coming through in the work, that I really appreciated. I have had battles with anxiety as well, and so I think that some of the conversations that she has in the comic book in issue 1, particularly with the therapist or psychiatrist, really ring true. And so I was really happy to see that it was really based in reality, at least at that aspect. The other thing that I really appreciated was seeing the perspective of the father in it, and how helpless that the father felt and how it impacted him. Having a really close relationship with my own dad, it kind of made me think, how did my own battles impact him? Was that important for you to show the way that the mental health impacted you as well as a father?
Yeah, definitely. So, and first I want to say thank you for sharing your own story, because I think it's so important. Like, so much of people's struggles end up being private, and then they think nobody else understands, or nobody. So by using your platform to share your own story, like it all makes a difference, I think. And so, in answer to your question, yeah, that was very important to me, as well as we wanted to show that, a lot of, not all the adults in this book, but, the therapist and the nurses in the hospital in the first issue and the father, like they are out there to help, you know what I mean? So like that was an important thing as well. But yeah, there's, I wouldn't say Gus is exactly like me, but there are conversations that sort of, where you say slightly the wrong thing with the best meaning, but, kind of make a situation worse or things like that. There was a lot of when we were going through this before we realized the extent, I would say things like, it's not that big a deal, trying to soften it. But it did feel like a big deal to her. And so the result is, it seems like you're not listening. And, so there was a bit of that kind of thing in in that scene and towards the end of the first issue. So like, yeah, there's a lot of little bits of our personal experience in there without it being like a direct one-to-one thing,
Right.
Yeah, I haven't had sorry, that relatable of the mental health side, but the feeling of helplessness is definitely related with me, and I could feel the father's, that pain of being able to sit there in a hospital cafeteria or whatnot and just not know what to do, not that power or loss of control over a situation. So that really rang true to me for my personal experiences. So when I was reading it, I really appreciated that you were able to capture that feeling in there and through your writing. So that was really great for me. How did that, or writing this, strengthen your bond with your daughter?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think our bond was pretty strong, even before this. I think like, it was a little different because there's this creative collaboration that, is different from anything we've done before. So it was kind of, we would sort of, break off into our own little parts. So like, for example, for the first issue, I did a lot of the sort of structure, we did an outline together and broke it down literally, 6 pages for this scene, 5 pages for this scene, or things like that. And then I would do the panel descriptions mostly for the first scene, or she did a lot of like redoing, she did the therapy scene entirely on her own. She did a lot of like tweaks to the hospital scene, and then all the dialogue for all the teenage characters, the therapist, things like that. So, but as we went through the issues, she did more like once she saw how it works, how a comic book script is structured. So like by the third issue, she did most of that also. So I would say she probably did like 60% of the third issue. And then the fourth issue, there was so much supernatural elements that had to be sort of, so I did a lot of that. But it really was a collaboration, and that was a unique thing that we, never experienced before.
Nice. One of the things that is common to those of us who have to deal with mental health issues is a bit of shame or embarrassment when discussing it with other people. Was that a bit of something that you guys had to overcome with this whole process of, kind of coming out with your family story, or, obviously having to then not only promote the book, but then discuss Naomi's experience in her personal life. And was that something that she had to come to terms with and realize that the good that's going to come out of this outweighs, maybe the personal hurt that she may have to kind of revisit?
Yeah. I mean, actually you summed it up quite nicely, because that was certainly my worry going in, you're putting yourself out there and then you can't take it back, like it's a very personal, but at the same time, like, my personal belief is, screw the stigma, you know what I mean? Like it's 2023, we're past the stage where that's acceptable. You know what I mean? Like we have to share these stories. We have to make it, something that, people feel comfortable about talking about. And she feels that way, and she saw what we were trying to do. And so she was all aboard. one element that was very important to us is I reached out to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and also another group called Broadcast Thought, which is a group of therapists who essentially like work with pop culture to like make the depictions, and a friend of mine as well as sensitivity readers. And the AFSP was very, very involved with, they contributed a resource guide. The reason I say all this is, they had a frank talk with me. It's like, you have to be careful. It's our first time doing a lot of media and things like that. So, it was a little limited, what she did, and was just, like, for example, we did a TV interview earlier this week with a local anchor, Cindy Sue, who was very upfront about her own mental health struggle. So it was like that kind of thing where I felt I tried to protect her as much as possible. But the early return, like, people are tweeting at us, and like, she's not on Twitter. That's something, but they're tweeting like, this reached me, and like, I saw my own story in this, and so there hasn't been a lot of negativity. Because my fear is always like, hey, if you have a bad review, don't take it personally. Like, listen to the constructive criticism, if there is constructive criticism, and if it's just like, you suck, then ignore it. So like, I'm used to it. It's part of the business, but I wanted to protect her as much as possible from that.
Nice. In addition to the good of the book, helping minimize the stigma of mental health, et cetera, it's also a fun book that has a lot of ties to the supernatural. What motivated you to have that supernatural angle versus, maybe a traditional superhero book, or, were there just fantastical powers that she could fly or do whatever? Why supernatural, and where was the inspiration for that?
So a couple of things. Like, number one, I felt that it's terrifying to go through, both for her and as a parent, in the most intense part of it. In that immediate part where before you really go on a journey of healing like that, it's so scary that it felt like a horror movie to me, certainly. And so I felt this, kind of captures that feeling. And then the other thing was, by doing it as a supernatural story and less sort of a gritty, realistic, or like a Fault in Our Stars kind of, teen story, it gives it it gives it a bit of a filter, right? Because it's so hopefully people who, recognize themselves in Cleo's struggle have a little bit of a cushion, because there's some fantastical elements and things like that. So we were trying to basically walk a very fine tightrope. And, I think by making it a little less hyper realistic, you have the catharsis, you have that feeling of recognizing your struggle, but there's an element of like, well, in a weird way, it's a little safer because it isn't a direct, directly telling it.
It's very cool. So the cover art, which I'm showing right here, done by Joe Quesada, and I think that's really cool. And I tweeted, or in our messaging back and forth, I mentioned that because I was rewatching our initial first interview, and he's helped you, I guess, kind of get your foot in the door in the comic book industry. And so I thought it was really neat that you got him to come and do the artwork for something that's really, like you said, very personal to you. So how did you wrangle him into it, I guess, so to speak?
Well, Joe's one of my closest friends, and he was there for my family during this time. Without going to too many specifics, like, one of the breakthroughs for my daughter was she went on a field trip into the wilderness, basically, with his high school environmental group, and I stayed with the Quesadas. They were much closer than our house is. Let's just say that, without putting a geography on it. And they put me up for like 11 days, wow. And just I mean, above and beyond. And when this project rolled around, this guy is incredibly busy. He's working on all sorts of things, which many of which have not been announced. And he made the time to not only do this, but to gift it to us to try to raise attention to this project. So there were several artists who did that. I also want to give a shout out to Matthew Rosenberg, because he is a friend of mine, and he gave me a lot of tips on how to do an image book, basically, where you're doing a lot of the stuff yourself. And actually, this is a Syzygy book, which is an imprint of image. So Chris Ryle, who's the owner and editor and everything, publisher of Syzygy, also did a lot. But one of the things Matt had told me was very important was to do variants, and not necessarily overdo variants, but to do really put your thought and put a budget into. And so for all 4 issues, we have some just incredible artists. When you see issue 4 with EM Gist's, it's terrifying. It's like a terrifying cover. There's Jessica Fong. There's just so many. I don't want to name check too many because I'll leave people out. But my Bounty Hunters artist for many years, Paolo Villanelli, contributed a comic. Yeah, so it was very important to us because this is how many people find their way into the book. And so we try to do a blend of the depression elements, but also some pure horror. This is the horror cover. The Fico Ossio cover is more of a sort of depression. That's the B cover. We have a fun manga cover. So we have a Walking Dead variant. So we're trying to do different people find their way in different ways. So, but having Joe do that main cover for that first issue was sort of planted our flag on the beach, So yeah, I owe him yet again.
Nice. And I think this is a perfect book for everyone who hasn't had an opportunity to read it for spooky season. I mean, we're in the midst of Halloween season. Was that planned purposely to get it released during this Halloween season?
Yes. It landed at the absolute best time, which was touch and go, because a lot of times you have these dates and you have to really rush to meet them. And as it's credit to the team, not only Marco, but our colorist, Andre Mosa, who was my colorist on Old Man Hawkeye, and Harmy Martinez, who is the letterer. They just did a great job under incredible deadline pressure. So we were able to do it because it's not only Halloween season, it's, we're based in New York. Marco is coming for New York Comic-Con. So we were able to have our release party, first signing at Forbidden Planet in New York all together, the three creators. That couldn't have happened if it was in any other window. So to have that happen was pretty cool.
I imagine that when you go to conventions now, that your fan base has changed a bit from, let's say, a Star Wars fanatic to now to someone that has a much more personal connection to your work. How has that been talking to fans that have a personal connection versus just, they like your work because they're a fan of the comic?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's incredible. And I think one of the cool things is I have a very rabid and vocal Star Wars fan base. And many of them have come over and not only bought this comic, but also, tweeted at me their own personal stories, which has been very moving. And yeah, they've been opening up about it and going public with their own stories, which in turn might help 1 or 2 other people who are kind of struggling in silence. And so,
absolutely.
The hope is that spreads that way. I've only been able to maybe meet 1 or 2 people personally who have had those conversations with, but I'm hitting the road and doing I think 10 more signings starting next week in California at one of the Comic Bug stores. I have to figure out still whether it's the Culver City one or Manhattan Beach one, and then Golden Apple in Hollywood. So those will be the next 2, and then I have a bunch more after that. I'll keep twinning those out as they get closer. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to meeting more and more fans to talk about that in person.
Very cool.
So you mentioned New York Comic Con, and right now, while we're recording this, you're in the midst of it. So you were, I believe, on a panel yesterday and on a panel tomorrow. So thank you for taking your
no
day
problem.
off to chat with us.
Yeah.
It's really
And
neat.
Naomi is actually just got offered to be on Joe Gatto's panel, which is it's on kind of anti-bullying, but also mental health issues, and that's at 6 p.m. tonight.
Oh, nice.
So that just sort of came up as well, and yeah. I'm actually not as busy as normal on Comic-Con. It's because I'm not doing, I guess there was not many signings. There was no image booth this year. So yeah, basically I'm just wandering around Artist Alley and talking to all these great people who I don't get to see all that much. So kind of
nice.
there as much as a fan as a creator.
You're fanboying like we would there. That's
yeah,
exactly.
Exactly.
Do you think your daughter, or do you think Naomi's going to continue writing comic books? Do you think maybe you've sparked something in her that she would want to make more?
Oh, she definitely, yeah. She's talking already, like she has an idea of her own that she wants to do. But I mean, right now she's in university, and I don't necessarily know like how immediate some of this stuff will be. But there's also, I think, I would like to keep working on this theme together. Like, there are certain mainstream publisher characters that I think would be good fits for like a mini series that can further on a larger platform, kind of keep this message going. Because I do think it's important and underrepresented.
Absolutely.
Really cool. Well, like I like to ask all of our guests, we are a pop culture show. So Ethan, what are you currently watching, reading, listening to in your spare time?
Well, I mean, I watch a ton of genre shows, and like right now it's all Gen V's probably my favorite current show that I'm watching right now. And Loki just started. I just finished Ahsoka. Obviously, I have to catch up on a bunch of other shows. I'm currently just started reading a book. I mean, I read comics voraciously, obviously, but I'm just started reading a book, Leave the Gun, Take the Cannoli, which is about the making of The Godfather. So I'm a big movie nut. So yeah, I love those sorts of nonfiction books. Yeah, I mean, I reading it's hard to name check all the comics because I always feel like I'm going to leave some friends out. So I'll just say I read a lot.
Right on. Well, thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to chat with us here at PopCultX. We really appreciate that. And everyone out there, go pick up A Haunted Girl. It's in your local comic book store now. Follow Ethan on Twitter or X or Instagram. Stay up to date with what's coming down the pipeline from his other writing adventures with Star Wars Bounty Hunter and other topics. So thank you again, Ethan. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you taking the time and helping spread the word on this.
Thank you.